Hello and welcome. You are listening to an episode of the Sales Chat Show. To stream or download a host of further free episodes that will power your sales success, please visit saleschatshow.com. We really hope that you enjoy and benefit from this episode. So, hello folks, and welcome to another episode from the Sales Chat Show, saleschatshow.com, driving your sales forward. With me in the studio is a rather scary-looking Phil Jesson, a rather scary-looking Mr. Graham Jones, and possibly an absolutely terrifying Simon Hazeldine. Why? Because in this episode we are asking, are you falling victim to any of these 5 scary customer tactics? So we're going over to the dark side of the force. We're looking at some dirty tactics that some, not all buyers, I think procurement people, buyers, like salespeople, a little bit like spaghetti westerns, you know, the good, the bad and the ugly. But we're talking here about some of the...
Which one are we?
Well, I allow our listeners to make their own minds up on that based on the fact they can't see us. So these are some maybe old school tactics, but they're still around sometimes, and I think it's just wise that salespeople are aware of these. Phil was just mentioning before we came on air for this episode, God, recognise these as tactics, Phil? Just
Yes, to recognise them as tactics, learned behaviour that they might have picked up on a course. In a sense, they're games. They are games that are being played. They're not necessarily real. So this isn't about jumping in quickly with a knee-jerk reaction. It's also about sort of playing that game and emerging successfully out the other side of it.
So we definitely want to raise your awareness of these so you can recognise them for what they are, which allows you to respond to them rather than react to them. That's certainly what I say a lot when I'm training salespeople in negotiation, is respond to these intelligently rather than react to them sort of emotionally. The first one I've had done to me, we're providing sales manager coaching training, and we're invited to tender for a whole sales force, a much bigger piece of business, invited in to meet procurement, who politely told me, first thing he said was he was delighted to have received my first pricing proposal, which I thought was an interesting opening comment, as in there was going to be another one to follow. And he then equally politely informed me that unless I dropped my price significantly, he would have no option than to put the contract, which we had nearly won, out to a full and complete market tender, including the business we already enjoyed from his organisation, and we would potentially lose the whole lot. And it's sometimes called a Russian front tactic. I believe I was told, the story I was told about it, that in the Second World War you were offered 2 choices, both of awfully horrible, but one was slightly worse than the other. So would you like to go to the Russian front and die, or would you like to go on this nearly suicidal mission? So you're offered 2 choices, neither of which is appealing. So the choices I was offered were drop your price or lose all of the business. Luckily for me, I had a couple of other stakeholders in this meeting who had told me they were desperately keen to get it started, and that they indeed were KPI'd. Their targets were to have this thing rolled out. So actually the procurement, it was a bit of a false threat. They didn't have time to go out to a full market tender, actually, which they'd already just done, if you think about it. So you've got to kind of recognise this for what it is, and respond accordingly to it. Have you experienced the Russian front, gentlemen?
I can certainly relate to that story as you're telling it. I can think of situations in my dark and distant past, yes, where I've been that.
Well, you were on the Russian front.
I've been that soldier with my furry hat.
Oh, Phil Jesson there has a dark past. I mean, must go into more of that later.
What you forget, for the Russian front, there is a third front, isn't there, which is the customer's problem, because they say you can either do this, you can either discount or lose the business. Yeah. And you say neither of those, because you're being given which is the worst of two evils. Right? So if you say neither of those, they are not going to accept that, because if you say neither of those and you walk out, they now have a much bigger problem because they don't have whatever you're supplying. They've now got to find new suppliers. They've caused themselves absolute chaos. So actually they don't want whatever it is that they're suggesting in either of those two options.
I mean, Graham's point is it, because the frame of reference for this is which of these two choices do you want? Nobody says you have to operate within the frame of reference of the procurement person. So frame control in negotiation, again, something which we maybe we need to cover on another episode.
I had a contract once for a German company, and it turned out that they were causing all kinds of problems, and so I went out to them and said, I'm sacking you as a customer. It's effectively what I was saying. Yeah, I'm no longer going to work for you. And they were saying to me, well, you have to work for us because you've got a contract. Yeah, so we'll sue you, or we'll sack you and we won't pay you for the work that we owe you the money for. And so I just sat there and I said, well, this contract, and tore it up and said, well, that we don't have a contract. Yeah, and by the way, you do have to pay me because I'll sue you. And so, in fact, they did pay me. We didn't carry on. Yeah, so they had to pay me for the work I'd done. We didn't carry on working. They were the ones in a big problem because they then had nobody to do the work for them from that point. If only they'd done what I'd asked them to do as the client, we'd have been okay. Yeah, but they were playing the Russian front with me, and I gave them a much bigger problem by refusing to accept it.
Probably every salesperson's fantasy, sacking a customer.
Yep.
So must be done at some stage. Mr. Jessup, over to you for the next one.
Good cop, bad cop.
Oh, that old chest.
Yes, and as that title suggests, we have to imagine that we're now talking to two people on the customer side, and from a behaviour point of view, one is giving us a hard time, the bad cop. Aggressive questions, bad body language, the full Monty. The good cop, interestingly, at this point, is probably reining in their colleague by saying from time to time, well, that's a little bit unreasonable, Tom, etc., etc. And then right
So
at
Tom
the
always the bad cop?
end, not always. And then right at the end, when the bad cop says, okay, well, you've got the business if you drop it by 5%. It's the good cop, sadly, who leans over and says, do you know something? I think my colleague's right. I think you should go ahead with that. So the hit does not come from the bad cop. It comes from the good cop, and it's sort of being aware of that. Awareness here is 90% of the solution. It's being aware that is where the tactic is going to come from.
It's very well known, I think, and a lot of salespeople talk about good cop, bad cop. You've got to think about the psychology of towards and away motivation, and you're more likely to move away to pain and discomfort. And they're playing those two, move towards pleasure, move away from pain. They're playing those two forces beautifully well. It's all planned in advance, it's all in tandem, and sometimes they flip roles in between meetings. Just got to recognise it for what it is. It's a tactic, and what comes out of the mouth of one, you need to treat as though it's come out of the mouth of both of them. Treat them as one person, I think, is a way of sometimes balancing that.
In my dark and distant past, we've all had dark and distant past, haven't we?
Speak for yourself, you two dark and distant past people.
As a journalist, you see this happen in press conferences. The pack of journalists, they all know each other, because they're all from, they're all correspondents in a particular topic, so they all know each other. And a group of them will be the kind of aggressive questioner, and the person then is backing away from that aggressive question. And meanwhile, there's somebody who's very pleasant, very quiet, and everybody in the room, apart from the person at the press conference, knows that it's their job to fire this seemingly gentle little question, which the person then moves towards and accepts and reveals all the answers that they were refusing to give to the aggressive questions. And so it's a tactic played by groups as well.
Yeah, and it'll happen in negotiation teams as
Yeah.
well. The nice, quiet, amenable person could be the one who fires
Absolutely.
the killer question
Killer
at
question.
you from the other side of the table. Competitors, Mr. Jones, the competitor card here.
Yeah, and in fact, that's a good word you use there, because I met a guy several years ago who, whenever he was going out to meet a potential supplier, would always take the business card of their competition that he'd met. And what he'd do is he'd walk into the room and he'd reach into his breast pocket to pick out his business card. Of course, at the top of the pile would be the competitor's card, and he'd go to hand it to them and he'd go, "Oh, sorry, I got that from them earlier, you need one of mine." Immediately at the very beginning of the meeting, and that competitor's card might have been from like 10 years ago, but it's just they've seen the logo, they've realised that he's met the competitor, not necessarily, just got their card, yeah. Automatically it put the potential supplier on the back foot.
Because they're going to try and use the competitor as the big threat.
That's
here,
it,
aren't
yeah.
they? You know.
So the people meeting this guy for the first time are now on the back foot going, well, he knows the competition, he's got their business card, he's already met them, we're in trouble.
It still amazes me that I think some buyers, if I was to be a little critical for them, think that we don't think they're talking to our because of course they are. As part of a sensible buying process, of course that's what you're going to be doing. You are and scheduling a meeting for us to bump into our competitors in the foyer, or having the competitors' literature on their desk, or my favourite was the competitor pen that was always used in a meeting with me, and they talk about meetings and conversations they're having with the competitors. Of course they're talking to you.
I had a neighbour years ago who was a very well trained buyer, and he told me once that he used to deliberately write in the book at reception upon arrival. Used to write in the name of a competitor organisation before the rep arrived from another supplier. So the arriving rep would see the appointment time and the name and the company 45 minutes beforehand and think, oh right, okay, so they're already talking to that lot then.
Or the reserved sign in the car parking space,
Yes.
you know, for the competitor's name.
That's it.
So these are all tactics that customers play in order to make salespeople think there's a problem of some kind.
And also the competitor will always be far more generous than you are and offer more than you are. And,
of course they do.
You know, it just recognise it for what it is. And of course you've got to ask yourself, if they're feeling so confident, why are they going to all this effort, you know, to keep mentioning the competition? We know they're going to talk to our competition. It's no surprise. It's no surprise to us. And then sort of going even further into the dark side is overt intimidation, use of aggression, sudden change of behaviour where the buyer suddenly uses profanities or aggressive hostile behaviour, designed to sort of try and trigger the fight or flight response. Most people go into flight when that happens. I certainly had that done to me as a very new, wet behind the ears salesperson in a big cash and carry where the guy just swept my sales presenter, smashed it literally off the desk and effed and jeffed at me and it certainly hit me as an inexperienced person, shocked me a bit. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a dirty tactic, but it's sometimes done to a less, I think, overt manner.
Yeah, see, but my reaction to those kind of people is I wouldn't want them as customers, so they lose out.
They run the risk, don't they, of playing a game that backfires.
I think the other side of the coin, actually, which is probably less dramatic but can be more effective, is not intimidation but indifference, which is Graham is presenting to me, and I'm showing nothing. I've got a buyer's training manual from one of the large supermarkets in Europe, and it says it trains its buyers to react to all salespeople and all sales proposals with complete and total indifference. So you just, no matter what's shown, you just appear to be very, very unimpressed, and it's probably easier to maintain than the aggression. Question, remember, it's a tactic. So if they are genuinely indifferent to what you're offering, why are they having a meeting with you? It's a question. I am certainly coaching a guy who said, they keep inviting me back in and telling me they've no intention of going forward with us. And I go, how many times have they asked you to come back in to tell you? 3 times. I go, well, there's a clue there.
They're obviously not interested.
Oh, no. So trust me, in a modern, busy organisation, you definitely don't have meetings with buyers. Sorry, you don't have meeting with suppliers you're not planning on doing any business with. So
it's like I've been married now for a long time, 30 plus years. And I remember when I first went out with my wife, we decided that we were not suited and that we would not go out with each other again. And then immediately at the end of that meeting, we arranged another date to not go out with each other again. And we kept not going out with each other again for several months before we decided that we'd get married. And here we are, nearly 40 years later of not going out again. It's that kind of thing, that if you are continuing to show interest, no matter what you say, it's what you do that matters.
Yeah, judge customers on their behaviour definitely more than what they're saying. And if they're making time to see you, that's a behaviour you should pay attention to. And the final one, Phil, this sort of the higher authority tactic where, hey Phil, I love your proposal, all fantastic, a little bit good cop, bad cop here as well, by the way, certain element. But I've just got to take that upstairs to Graham, my boss, or the marketing, or whoever it is.
Well, if that happens, it would highlight, of course, that maybe early on in the sales process we haven't really qualified the decision-making process. And if we do that early on, there is an opportunity, of course, to invite into the room people that are involved in the decision, or only to go so far in the sales process and then come back on another day to meet those individuals. But just on the subject of higher authority and other aspects of it, if we wanted to be provocative, I think we could say, well, if you are working with buyers, you're always going to get some of these tactics. Maybe one of the places where we also ought to be known is in the boardroom. And if we are known in the boardroom, and if we are adding value in the boardroom, then probably we're not going to be put through some of this nonsense by procurement people in quite the same way. It's easy for me to say that, but in order to get a presence in the boardroom, it probably means that as salespeople, we've got to deploy our bosses, our sales director, our chief executive. We've got to deploy them with a purpose on a sales-related matter. But I know from my own experience in this area that although as salespeople it's often quite difficult to make appointments to see people, it's often very easy when a chief executive's PA phones somebody else's PA and says, my boss needs to see your boss, and they can set up a meeting very, very easily and have that strategic level of conversation way above where the buyer is.
Definitely time to record an episode, I think, on leveraging your senior managers in your organisation. We'll make sure we do that for you folks, because there's a whole lot of very valuable content here. Suffice to say, the higher authority tactic, that whoever is referred to is always going to be unhappy with your pricing and everything you do, or you really do want to do this deal with me, Phil, because Graham is a really nasty piece of work, and so on and so forth. And again, it's a little bit like the good cop, bad cop dynamic. They're trying to play you, they're playing one off against the other.
They forget that you can play the same tactic. So they say, I can't do this deal, you need to see my boss, and he's a nasty boss or whatever, or my boss wants a discount, so you can't argue with the higher authority who's not in the room, so therefore you do the discount in order to satisfy this higher authority. Well, my reaction to that is, well, I'm not allowed to approve discounts, you've got to speak to my boss, who's not in the room. So they've got higher authority, so have we as salespeople, and they forget that. It's a tactic they're playing, so we don't have to fall for it.
And I would say, just as we move to a close, is that in my experience, and I've trained tens of thousands of salespeople and buyers to negotiate, is skillful behaviours and good planning and preparation are far more effective than these sort of tactics that are being used, particularly if you're a sharp cookie, that you realise them for what they are, that it is a tactic.
Yeah.
And then you're able to neutralise or reduce the impact of the tactic by recognising it for what it is. And that's the real aim in this exercise, to allow you to respond to these rather than to react to them. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts for our lovely listeners?
Well, I would have, but you need to speak to my boss about them.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Jessen.
No, I'm done on that.
I need to mention, woohoo, our brand new, you maybe go on to Netflix, you maybe go on to Amazon Prime, you may like binging box sets, dear listeners. Well, Sales Chat Show, we like to keep moving things forward, so if you want to binge on a box set from the Sales Chat Show, please find our new chat box facility, where we're going to put together all the episodes on a particular topic, so that if you want to binge listen to those, or you want to know where they all are, you can do that. Graham has pulled together the first one, which is on negotiation, so a great thing to mention, and we'll be bringing more Sales Chat Show chat boxes for you, so there will be box sets of topics on a similar sales management, negotiation, value propositions, etc. So if you want to do a real bit of cramming on a subject, you can find that information really easily. So Chatbox Plus, probably 140, 150 episodes available from Sales Chat Show from wherever you get or subscribe to your podcast. Please subscribe to Sales Chat Show and you'll get an episode every single week. And also from the saleschatshow.com website if you want to find them there. In the meantime, we would obviously just like to wish you good luck and good negotiating, recognising these tactics for what they are. So thank you for listening, and we would finally like to wish you good luck and good selling, folks. You have been listening to an episode of the Sales Chat Show. To stream or download a host of further free episodes that will power your sales success, please visit saleschatshow.com. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and from everyone here at the Sales Chat Show, we'd like to wish you good luck and good selling.